Hi, I'm Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology, and today I'm going to talk about the mansions of the moon in general, but I'm also going to talk about our new 25th mansion talisman. And you can see the link to that. Also, there's links to the mansion pages here on the Renaissance Astrology website. So let me just talk a little bit about the mansions of the moon. I think everyone's very comfortable with planets. Also, the sort of cutting edge right now is fixed stars. Mansion of the Moon, again, I think people maybe have a sort of peripheral awareness of it, but again, not too focused on exactly what they are. So the Moon takes 27.5 days to orbit the Earth. So it's logical. You could have 27 mansions, which is what they have in Indian, the nakshatras, or you could have 28. I mean, either one totally makes sense. There's not one's right or wrong or whatever. Just depends on which, sort of like speaking a language. This is 27 in the Indian system and then 28 in the Arabic Western astrology that we use in medieval Renaissance astrology. It's been described as a lunar zodiac. So I think that's an interesting approach to it. The moon is, again, passing through these various mansions, and each of them has their own attributes. They have their own angels and spirits that are associated with them. Now, originally, this is again like the sun. This is the path of the moon against the fixed stars. Was against a fixed set of fixed stars, which is again goes into everyone's sort of automatic sidereal is better, blah 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 blah. It's funny because Al-Biruni, who's a medieval astrologer, he says that the desert Arabs were so backwards that they still use the constellational mansions. He said, while the sophisticated cosmopolitan astrologers use the tropical zodiac. And so in the medieval Renaissance astrology, the mansions of the moon have been integrated into the tropical zodiac. And so, for example, the first mansion starts at 0 Aries, and then you have a 7, and then you have another one starting at the various movable signs, so Cancer, Libra, etc., etc. Very much integrated into the medieval Renaissance astrology. And if you're interested, again, if you do the whole automatic sidereal blah 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 thing, take a look at the link there. This is a good way to kind of expand your understanding and knowledge of it. I mean, again, I'm not saying that sidereal zodiac is wrong. I'm not saying that tropical zodiac is the best. I'm just saying there are alternate approaches. See what the medieval Renaissance astrologers did. They were not crazy. They were not insane. They were not totally not knowing what's going on, as the propaganda says. But this is the sort of methodology that they use. There's a basis for it, and you can look at that. I mean, if you're going to do medieval Renaissance astrology, you kind of need to accept the basic tools and functionality and approach that they did. But you don't have to do that. If you want to do modern, you can basically do whatever you want, and that's perfectly well too. So again, check it out. Good way to expand your knowledge and understanding, and then you can make the final choice. And again, it's really a matter of preference, not whether one is right or wrong. So let's think about, okay, so we're talking about medieval Renaissance astrology. Let's talk about the various subdivisions of medieval Renaissance astrology and see how mansions were used in them. Now, the automatic assumption of modern astrologers is natal. That's what astrology is. That's what it's all about. If you're going to have something astrological factor, the first question is going to be, how is it used in natal astrology? How is it used in my chart? What can I get out of it for my chart? Well, mansions, not much, okay? They're really not used very much in natal astrology. We do have this partial, list of the moon in a particular mansion for natal astrology from Astromagia. It's missing a couple signs. And the problem with it is it's a single factor thing. So like any single factor, it's like, X in, moon in a particular sign means X. Okay, the problem with that is it's all by itself. It's a single factor, and it's not that useful in our medieval Renaissance delineation because we always want to judge on multiple factors. We're not looking at this as X factor automatically 100% equals Y effect or Y prediction. What we're doing is we're using a whole cluster of factors. We're looking at the whole interaction of the chart, and we're trying to see the underlying spiritual patterns. So we always want to do a judgment based on multiple significations. Okay, so that's a problem right there. And again, I don't think that the mansions are useful for natal, is my personal opinion. Now that in modern astrology would mean that they're useless, but again, as you'll see in medieval Renaissance, there's actually quite useful and quite incredible. So the next step would be electional. Again, we have Picatrix, book 1, chapter 4, lists certain things that you can do. You can elect with a mansion. And they're mentioned other parts of Picatrix. Again, these are single factor. And in the other portions of Picatrix where they're talking about mansions, they're kind of doing a grab bag. They're just sort of throwing out these various factors, and they throw in the mansions into it. and without really kind of integrating them, without them sort of being coherent. I mean, for example, if you look at, I have what I call a modular approach, and a lot of times different chapters of Picatrix will have a focus. So, for example, they say we'll focus on the moon sign, and then we look at that moon sign rising or the moon in that sign, for example, and then we look at the nature of that sign. And that kind of is coherent and makes sense. I mean, each of the signs governs various activities, has different attributes. If we want to focus on those attributes, we can, focus. So it's sort of sign focus. That makes sense. But throwing the mansion in, again, it's not unreasonable to do that. It's in the source, but again, there's not a logical, coherent way of doing that. And the other thing I would say about it is it just says put the moon in the mansion, and the moon's gonna be in the mansion for almost a day a lot of the time. So that's a pretty imprecise. It's maybe better than moon phase, which is lasting for like half a month. But again, the power of medieval Renaissance elections comes from that pinpoint quality of them. And typically, the shorter the election, the more powerful it is because you're lining up more factors, you're more precise. The less precise it is, the more widely applicable it is, the less powerful it is, the less oomph you're going to get out of it. So again, that's what I would say about electional. Again, you can certainly integrate it into elections. It's there in the medieval Renaissance, but it's not really so much used. The real use of mansions of the moon in medieval Renaissance astrology is for magic. Okay, and that's where we really get the maximum use in our sources. We have a lot of stuff about how to use the mansions for magic. And so what's interesting too is that we have multiple traditions. And you can see this sort of in the various, obviously different manuscripts, different approaches to the mansions within our traditional sources. So for example, Picatrix, Book 1, Chapter 4 has one set and has a whole bunch of different, mostly electional. What it will say is, in this, you can make talismans for this particular purpose, okay? What they're not giving you the information about is they're not giving you, they give you the effect, but they're not telling you how to make the talisman, basically. They're not giving the image, they're not giving incense, they're not giving materials, they're not giving you the name of the Lord of that mansion. So not that useful in terms of making talismans. You're kind of lacking the information you have necessary. Now you look at Picatrix, Book 4, Chapter 9, different tradition, okay? Contradictory, because my students or people ask me, say, why will, this mansion and this thing says X, and this mansion is completely, same mansion is contradictory. It's like different traditions, okay? It's a bit like, if you go to, typical positive color white in the West. I mean, you do that for weddings, you wear white. Maybe for christening, you wear white. White is considered to be a color for funerals. It's a negative color. Now, is it negative or positive? It depends on the tradition. Then it depends on what you're operating in. Okay, so that's what I would say about it. Is that if you want to do the Book 1, Chapter 4, that's great. If you want to do book 1, Chapter 4, that's great. Book 4, Chapter 9, those are different traditions. What you don't want to be doing is mixing and matching. Okay, and there's even a third tradition, Astrology, which is, you can see, is kind of mix of the two with additional talismans. Again, these are usable if you include the effects, because they have the effects, the image, and the ruler name. So my focus when I make mansion talismans is Picatrix, Book 4, Chapter 9. And the great thing about that is that you've got complete information there about what the talisman does, what the mansion does, who the mansion lord is, how to make the talisman. Everything you need to make the talisman is provided for you. At least in skeletal form. We have to do a little fill in, but that's giving you, whereas the Book 1, Chapter 4 is just not giving enough information. Now, what people want to do is mix and match. This is the modern approach. The modern approach is everything sort of tinker toy interchangeable, and you can basically do whatever you want, and if you run into something, it doesn't stop you, just kind of rationalize your way around it and throw in from a different source. The problem is that you've got, like I said, an image for love from Book 4, Chapter 9, used for a Book 1, Chapter 4 curse talisman. Doesn't make a lot of sense. So I don't recommend you do that. If you're going to do it, follow the approach that's in each of the different manuscript traditions that are filed there. If you like one, use that one, but don't mix and match. Again, that's my approach. I think a more traditional approach, again, modern, you're going to just go ahead and mix and match what you want, but that's, again, your choice. But I want to lay out that there's an alternative to the modern approach. So how do I do the elections for the talismans? Again, this is kind of a process that's developed. Picatrix, Book 4, Chapter 9 basically says put the moon in the mansion. Well, we can increase the power by making the moon rising or culminating in the mansion. So that's what I do for mansion talismans. And then we want to make sure that the moon is not afflicted, other than the fact that, for example, if you're doing a mansion that's in Capricorn, you ignore the fact that the moon is in detriment there. This is a different cycle from the sign cycle. If the moon is in Scorpio, again in fall, but the mansion's in Scorpio, again, you ignore that. This is a separate cycle, okay? We're not dealing with the zodiacal cycle. We're not doing the essential dignity. In this case, this is alternative. You don't need to worry about the fact that the moon happens to be in detriment if you want to make a mansion that happens to be in Capricorn. Other things, though, the moon's applying to an opposition square of any planet, conjoining a malefic, unafflicted planet, et cetera, et cetera. And again, what's your definition of what afflicted is and all that, your orbs and everything is going to vary. But that's basically my approach, is to use my standard affliction other than the fact of the moon's essential dignity if it's in that particular mansion. The other thing I'm going to take a look at it, because this is a moon talisman, is moon phase. I don't generally look at moon phase, but for a moon heavy talisman, something that's a moon talisman, a mansion of the moon talisman, a fixed star talisman, because the moon is our key actor in those cases, I will take a look at moon phase. I don't have a view though, waxing good, waning bad. Basically, waxing is going to be increase. So if you want to, like a well talisman, you'd probably want to have that as in a waxing moon. Waning is for decrease. So, for example, something like algol, I mean, you could think of it, I think waning or waxing is good for either one. Algol, you're going to increase the power, but also get rid of curses. So it seems like either waxing or waning is appropriate for a protection talisman. The other thing that's about waning talismans is wisdom. So if you want to if the moon's waning, that's also appropriate for a wisdom talisman. So again, something to keep in mind. And again, this is just my approach. I mean, if you want to have more factors, it's going to be harder to find elections. If you have less factors, it's going to be easier to find, but they're going to be weaker. So there's always this sort of trade-off. Again, not a right or wrong. If people love to point at somebody else's elections to say that's bad, it didn't work or something like that, it's not true, okay? It's just like, very important to have respect for other people's approach, and there's lots of varying approaches that are possible with doing this. Okay, so what about compatibility with your natal chart for a particular mansion talisman? So you're interested in the third mansion, you'd like to get that, but you would like to know if it's compatible with your natal chart. Mansions, I'm not really exactly sure about that. What I basically look is to see if the moon is afflicted in your natal chart, and if it is, then what I do is do an I Ching for the specific mansion. So if you had your moon in Capricorn in a natal chart, I'd say, okay, well, that's a question mark. It's not a disaster. It's not going to be automatically a problem. Let's just go ahead and do a divination and see if that particular mansion is good for you. And so that's basically how I approach that. Again, very, very much my approach, and I think what I'd like to say is that I don't think reduce the fear about this. It's basically just a way of because I've had plenty of people that have had talismans of planets afflicted in their chart, for example, that had great results from that talisman. So the fear, the anxiety, the OCD stuff that is brought to astrology in a lot of places and plays itself out, I think you can relax. Particularly with the Renaissance astrology talismans, we're dealing with angels. Really don't have to worry about blowback or negative effects. I think the worst effects that get reported by people are there's no effect at all. So let's talk a little bit about some specific mansions, because it's really you got 28 mansions. We got a lot of different possibilities. Some are positive, some are negative. I don't do any malefic magic, so I'm going to be talking purely about positive mansions. So let's start off with some of my favorite ones, which are the third mansion. This is a gorgeous Nigel Jackson image of the third mansion of the moon. And then the seventh mansion. This is a Robert Place image. Again, very beautiful images coming from the Picatrix descriptions. Third and seventh mansion are for all good things. And that's pretty broad. And what I do, this is a good example of sort of my practice with the mansions. Every month I have some specific mansions I've chosen. Every month when the moon goes in those mansions, I will do an invocation of the Lord of that mansion. Burn some incense and a candle and just invoke them briefly. And with all good things, it's noticeable often that I'll have an increase, not always, but often I'll have an increase in my business around the time of either the third or the seventh mansion that month. So it's just interesting how that's a pretty regular sort of thing. It doesn't always happen, but I said it's kind of cool to see that effect over. I mean, I've probably been doing these now for almost 15 years to see that regular sort of effect. So that's cool. Third and seventh mansion, those are great mansions. Let's take a look at some more. 13th mansion, okay? This is a sex plus love. So definitely sort of a focus on sex, but by no means, excluding love. Really powerful mansion. And then we've got the 26th mansion. Then we can say this is love plus sex. So this is focus on love, not to take out or eliminate sex by any means. So these are really useful mansions. Just see those again. These are really useful mansions if your Venus is afflicted, for example. If for some reason you can't use Venus for love and you want to still have you have a love talisman, then the mansions of the moon are a great way to sort of a workaround, for problems with Venus. You can still get a love talisman. You can still work with it. Again, this is one of the great things about medieval Renaissance astrology is we have such an incredibly full toolkit, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So then the next mansion example, this is a 16th mansion. This is for wealth, particularly in business. So again, the mansions really run the gamut in terms of all the different possible effects that they can cause. Okay, so the final mansion talisman I want to talk about is the 25th mansion of the moon. Very exciting. These are for good harvest, growth, and protection of plants. So first of all, right off the bat, you say, well, this is great for gardening. I mean, and that's what really attracted me to this, because I've got basically fallen into doing a lot of landscaping, gardening, and growing flowers. You wouldn't even think that was, I wouldn't have thought of that, but it's really something that I've really come to enjoy. I can see why people get into it. So that's the first thing that this talisman is really great for, is just straight up for, protection and help. I mean, I need it. I've got all sorts of deer and pests and all sorts of stuff I got to protect my plants from, and I want to have them grow and flourish. So that's great if you're into gardening. But what's even more exciting, I think, about it is that this is a great adjunct to green magic. So anyone who's interested in that sort of green magic, the magic of plants, magic of growth, earth magic, Gaia, all the sort of intertwined things, is a great talisman for them. And it's a great fit with my green magic mini course. Green magic mini course utilizes the green Picatrix, the Liber Veritas, the green version of it. This you need to get separately, but check out that green magic mini course. Be a great adjunct to this talisman. Punch up your power, both your knowledge through the course and also the power of the green magic that you do through the talisman. And let me just show you what the talisman looks like. Gorgeous talismans. These are full 28 ounces. This is, 28 grams is an ounce talisman. Very solid, substantial talisman. Beautiful image. Very powerful, a green magic talisman. So I hope you find that interesting. Great, I think, overview of the mansions, what they are, how to use them magically, and all the various different things you can do with them. We really have this great expanded full toolkit in medieval Renaissance astrology that allows us to deal with things from a whole different kinds of angles, lots of different possibilities. So I hope you find it interesting. If you want to dive more into mansions, check out my mansions mini course. And for the deepest dive, the Astrological Magic Course, which gives a full explanation, in-depth, full chart elections, give you the full power, and allows you to create your own mansion talisman. So again, check that out. 25th mansion, the new talismans, all the other mansion talismans I mentioned if you find them interesting. And again, the mansions mini course as well as the Astrological Magic Course. Immense amount of resources as well as all the other links for free available on the Renaissance Astrology website.